I think someone once said you can have 100 good comments on a YouTube video, but you're going to focus on the one bad comment.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's the same thing with everything else, right? Even with businesses, you could have 100 wins. You could sell 100 products based off an ad campaign, but you have one person send in a bad review and you're going to focus all your time on that. So
Yeah.
finding ways to change your frame of reference, I think, is critical to success.
I really really love that. I don't want anybody to miss it. Like we talk it like I mean I talk about it at length sometimes, but it's reframing the win, right? And I feel like sometimes it can be so easy, particularly for I mean for entrepreneurs, business people, business owners, salespeople, whatever it is. It can be so easy to think of our goal, whatever our goal happened to be, whether it be a sales quota or making ends meet or whatever the case might be. It can be so easy to frame the goal as winning, wherein really I believe that the goal should be really more of a milestone on the journey, and the winning is done day in and day out when we're again like just getting a couple more likes on a post or whatever it is. There's something small that will ultimately build up to achieving that goal.
Jacob, do you have a practice to maybe change your frame of reference from short-term thinking to long-term?
So I mean, there's a couple of ways that I kind of go about it, and we kind of just discussed it, but it's reframing the win. And I mean, a lot of the time, particularly if we're talking about reframing the winning from like the big goal setting or, opening a new restaurant or whatever the case might be into the smaller things, what I call it's going to the cookie jar. And I kind of stole this from David Goggins a little bit. It's when, you find those wins every single day. And it's similar in my mind to gratitude. When, sometimes you wake up and you have like, you're just, on fire, ready to go, going to go crush the day, whatever it is, right? Like those are really, really great days, and you have phenomenal days like that, right? But more often, at least in my opinion, in my experience, the days aren't always like that. And sometimes the win is I showed up today, even though I hate this or whatever, or I hated doing this thing today. One common example is going to networking events. When people are like, man, I hate networking events. I don't like talking to a million people and stuff, and that's fine. But a lot of us, myself included, have to go to networking events. Like it's just part of how we grow. So in my opinion, like it's reframing it a little bit to allow ourselves to stretch. And one comment I always suggest is if you hate going to networking events, say, okay, I'm going to go to a networking event. That can be a win. Okay, then once we get more comfortable with that, then we can say, okay, I'm going to go to this networking event, and I'm going to meet one person that I think is going to be a decent contact. Not that I'm going to do a bunch of business with them, not that they're going to refer to me to everybody that they know, but just establish one good contact and keep growing in small increments like that. The other thing that I think, too, especially when we're talking about more long-term thinking, is end goal visioning. And like the thing that I do with every single client that I bring on in my coaching practice is it's an exercise I call the interview that forces you to sit down and say, okay, for example, what does my ideal day look like in 5 years? And sometimes people will say things to the effect of, my ideal day is, waking up, going to a job that I love where I make a bunch of money. Then I come home and I hang out with my kids. It's like, there's nothing wrong with saying stuff like that. But that's not nearly deep enough. You need to like walk me through like as much of your day as you can and really make me feel it. Because in my opinion, I think, in sales and in business, we don't start with the end in mind nearly enough. And then the end in mind can be like, I want to grow a business. I want to establish something like that, which is, again, all well and good. But what life do you really want to lead? And when you start digging into some of those harder questions, the way that I think of it is when you ask those hard questions, when you start with the really true end goal in mind, what you really, really want in 5 or 10 years, in my mind, that's like you're building a boat. So those are like, hammering in the nails, getting all like putting the wood together, however you build a boat, like you building a boat with asking yourself those questions. And then the work that you do day in and day out, where, like you say, you're embracing the suck, you're getting like, a couple more likes on a comment or whatever it is, those small wins, that's what makes the boat float so that you can actually drive towards the things you're actually getting.
That's that frame of reference, I think, especially in our busy world. Recently read the book, John Mark Comer, Ruthless Elimination in a Hurry.
Yep. That's a great one.
Phenomenal book.
Yeah.
But again, I think it reminds us to slow down and then reframe the end in mind.
Mm.
And how often do we actually do that? And I think every time that I have slowed down, I try and dedicate the first 30 minutes of every single day now, just stepping back from my organization that I run today and asking if specific questions I ask is, what is the perfect state in a year? What do I want the organization to look like in a year? How do I get there? What am I doing today to drive us towards that goal? And then really there's some like checks and balances in there of, was yesterday a good day, or are we going in the right direction? And I think at the end of the day, having that conversation with myself, you have to be honest. And I think the honesty is, there's days that I fail, right? There's days that we didn't make progress, but reflecting on that and not losing sight of the end boat or whatever we're trying to build, kind of it allows us to keep momentum and progress, and slowing down, I think, is key and critical to that.
I really, really like that because, I mean, especially in today's day and age, and let me know if you disagree with this, but I feel like we're obsessed with busyness. Like, I want to say like, oh my gosh, yeah, I've got all this stuff. I got my calendar is packed for the next, 45 weeks or whatever it is. Like, I've got all this stuff going on. And I feel like we can so easily confuse busyness with progress. And I mean, you have to make sure that you're, like you said before, you have to take your step back, eliminate some hurry a little bit and say, am I actually driving towards this, vision that I have for my business in a year? And sometimes the answer is no.
And often it's not, right? I got lost in the minutia. The group that I manage for the corporation I work with is total group of about 78 people. And I often hear from them, and they know this, is I will ask them how they're doing, and they will tell me busy. And instead of just going about the day, I turn around and say, busy doing what? And that often throws people back on their heels. They start to ask themselves, oh man, what am I busy doing? Right. And then I'll continue to ask, well, is it making progress? Are you being effective? Right. Because you can be busy all you want, but if you're not being effective, then there's no progress towards an end goal. And so asking the question like that, pretty consistently for the last 7-8 months has sparked a lot of conversations around people asking, okay, what do I do weekly, daily, monthly, even quarterly? And what's the value of it? And how do we rate those things? And how do we perceive our work? We recently ran through an exercise that was, I called it the good, bad exercise. And everyone in the group kind of just word vomited on a whiteboard what was good about their job and what was bad about their job. And then the things that were bad, we pieced off. And I then asked the question, what of these things that are bad about your job do you have control over? It turns out they had control over 95% of it.
Yep.
We did everybody in the room, and I said, the majority of you have manager in your title. You can manage this. Whether you have direct ownership or indirect ownership, you can influence this. And to see the positive change people from that, just realizing that they can have an impact on their lives or their day, and getting them to step back and saying, okay, I hate all these things, but I can actually do something about it. Again, is just kind of one of those interjection points of getting people to reframe things and look at things differently.
Yeah, which I mean, I feel like generally speaking, we have a lot of control in our lives, and like can't control everything, right? Like somebody treats you like crap, you can't do much about that sometimes. But I mean, like I really believe that most of the time, we can control our reaction to things, right? Like somebody swears at me or whatever on the phone. I can't necessarily control that guy, but I can control my reaction to it. If you don't mind, I want to ask a question. I really like that good bad exercise that you guys did. Can I ask for the bad stuff? You said the managers can control these things, right? Or can influence them to some degree. How much of that, like that stuff, whatever it was, came down to them being intentional?